giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast. And here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Art of Selling Travel Podcast. I can't wait for this. So this episode, we're going to talk about sticker shock. I don't know about you, but if you've been in the travel business a minute, I'm going to bet there's a good chance your social media feeds have been flooded with a very specific ship. I actually laugh because it was the day of that inaugural, or not the inaugural, when it was first arriving into Miami. And my adult son, he's 25, sends me a TikTok reel and he's like, "Hey, Mom, have you seen anything about this ship?" And I just laughed and I said, "Sweetheart, I'm in travel. Of course, this is the only thing I have seen." He's like, "So what would a trip like this kind of cost a guy?" I said, probably about this much. And then I thought, so then I actually asked him straight up. I'm like, "So are we hinting this is where we want to go for the next big family trip?" See, in our house, we don't exchange gifts. We save up what we would have spent and then we go on a trip together. I personally love that. We had gone away from it for a few years when our kids were getting to the point that they were going to be moving out. So instead of going on vacation, sometimes they got, pots and pans. They very quickly as adults said, "Can we go back to not getting gifts and instead travel?" So that is where we're headed back as we go forward. And I did laugh that he's like, "So what would this set a guy back?" And then he sent me an assortment of videos. I think my favorite was, and I don't recall the category off the top of my head, but it was like the townhouse suite, 2-bedroom, something or other. I gave him the price. He's like, "Holy crap. Who spends that?" Well, here's the thing. I'm going to say probably not a 25-year-old ranch hand. But there's people out there that are spending it. And then over this last little while here, I've talked to a lot of travel advisors who were like, there's no way. I had clients that asked about it and I told them, "I know you're not going to spend that kind of money." Well, it got me thinking that we need to have a conversation. So I fully said to that travel advisor, when I looked it up, I had a little sticker shock. Because I've been around for a while. I remember pulling up to the first mega ship. And I remember being in the bus that brought us from the airport to the ship. We were there for training. And I just remember pulling up and I actually said, I'm like, "Holy ship, Batman." Like, that was insane. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. Now, this was going back, I like to say a little while, but I think we're like 10, 11, 12. Oh, I got to stop counting. That number's getting awful. But a lot of years. What seemed like not that long ago is now starting to sound like a lot of years. So I've been on the mega ships. Personally, I love them. I love the space per capita compared to what you get in some of the other ones. Now, I'm not saying book this cruise line versus that or whatever, at least not without them sponsoring. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to tell you that you have to pick this. But I will say that there was a moment of sticker shock because even I was a little surprised at where the price point was. When I told my son, "It'll cost you about this," and then I had a quick look, I'm like, "Nope, sorry, that was wrong. That's not what it's going to cost." And I had a moment where I'm like, "Yeah, we're not doing that for a few years." But here's this thing, or here's my question for you. Are you taking those same thoughts into the conversations with your clients? Are you letting your sticker shock determine whether or not your clients get to experience something? Because I'm here to tell you, if your sticker shock is telling them they can't do it, one of two things is going to happen. One, they're going to book something that possibly they didn't want to book. actually one of three. Well, they're going to book something that they didn't want to book or hadn't thought of booking, but you've now made it about price. 2, you aren't capable of handling that price point, so they'll find another advisor that can. We need to have really in-depth conversations and put context behind what our price is. Why do things cost what things cost? We need to frame that into the conversation. Well, first off, anytime something is new and shiny and bright, she's going to have a different price. And depending where you're at in your business, maybe you sell a lot of all-inclusives. Well, we all know when a brand new luxury all-inclusive comes out, if you can get in on the ground floor, those prices are phenomenal. Well, that also happens too with cruise lines and with other such. The group rates. I know I've talked to travel advisors like, oh yeah, I have a huge group booked. Like, that's fantastic. They're like, yeah, it's like half the price of what it's showing now. Like, my clients love me. Well, when we look at it from the factor of how does pricing get determined, it is strictly supply and demand. So when pricing is that much, we have to consider the fact that the demand is that much. I'm also going to say on a week where so much money has been poured into marketing, has been poured into exposure, has been poured into driving desire, you better bet your bottom dollar the price point's going to be higher. Because here is the one thing I want you to ask yourself. 3 months prior to this ship coming out, how many of your clients reached out and said, hey, how much is that? Hey, I'd like to go on that. I'm going to say probably not as many as what you had the week it flooded the newsfeed. Demand and desire was built in because everybody saw what was going on. My favorite of all the articles where they talked about the new Godfather, I think that's what they call him, the Godfather of the ship and the christening and everything else. And everybody was more entertained by the MC. That's what you got to love about the different generations is like, that's my childhood right there at the podium. And so I have no idea who that Godfather person was. I believe a soccer/football player, whatever you want to call him, depending on what part of the world you're in. But I was more fascinated by the MC. There's also a concept of how much did they invest in that? How much did they invest in that event, in that ship, in the innovation? Having sat in on a presentation November of 22, where this particular cruise line was talking about some of the innovations that were coming, some of the things that they were pouring into this ship, there's a cost associated with that. So we need to put a frame and context around what price points are, around what it is that things cost. And then we need to look at why are people booking? Well, for some people, they want the brand new ship. When you are talking a ship of this magnitude, people don't really necessarily care as much about the ports. They're all going to say, oh, well, we need a new itinerary. We need this. There's limitations as to where those ships can go. But I'm also going to say, I see more people that stay on board on that ship than what goes into port, relatively speaking, than on other ships. Because there's so much going on that the ship itself becomes the destination. I'm going to be in Eastern US. Well, I'm going to be a little ways outside of New York for a conference in September. And when I go to this conference, I'm looking at my different flight options, and one of them is to fly into New York. And I'm like, I've never, in all my years of selling travel, all my years of everything, I've never actually been to New York City. Like, I've flown through it, I've connected. I remember the day I flew to JFK to catch my flight to Madrid. That just felt very Hollywood-esque. But that's the closest I've come to doing New York. And I don't think JFK counts. But anyways, I thought, you know what? Let's go ahead. Let's take an extra night or 2 or 3 or 7 and check out New York City. Well, I'm going to tell you, I started pricing out New York City hotels. Holy crap, Batman. Do you have any idea what a New York City hotel costs for a 3-star where nothing's included? Suddenly, it starts to offset what the cost of that cruise might be. Because there were hotels, I kid you not, that I did not think were that fabulous that were $1,200, $1,500, $2,300 per night. Well, I'm going to tell you, when I was pricing out New York City a couple of years ago for some clients, I want to say they were looking to go, I believe it was in 2021. Those exact same hotels for approximately the exact same time of year were 75% less than they are now. So the question becomes, do I want to go or don't I? Now that's my decision, because the price is the price is the price. I don't get to call the hotel and say, you know what, I think your price is out to lunch, so we need to negotiate. You need to be giving me a much better rate. And they're going to say, yeah, funny you should mention that. We've got conferences booked. We've got this booked. We've got that booked. Travel is through the roof. No, we do not need it because the demand is so high. And the same is true for every piece of travel out there. Price in travel is 100% reflective of supply and demand. The only thing you can do is relay where we're at for pricing. Now, here is a true irony. I have travel advisors who were like, no, that ship is, no, I told my people they can't afford it. But yet these are also people willing to pay a fee, and people who you're going to put them on a lower cruise line. Like, it's not even just a cruise ship, putting them on a lower quality cruise line because you determined that price point was more important to them. And then this morning, when I was debating for sure what I was going to record this week, I was 99.9% sure this was going to be the topic. I knew it was going to come up at some point. I was watching an Instagram reel, and it was somebody highlighting this ship and how amazing it is and this, that, the other. And then they went on to say, and it doesn't cost anything to work with a travel agent. And I thought, wow, you're going to get them to pay that to book that, but you're not worth anything. That was really interesting. It was a really interesting comparison. Because what it meant to me, what I interpreted as, is we all have really skewed opinions of what has value and what doesn't. What people are willing to pay and what they're not. What money means and what it doesn't. I've just come out of 2 of the most amazing days of coaching for myself. And the number one thing that every speaker hammered in was your pricing reflects your value. It reflects your positioning within the market. That big cruise ship at that price point has positioned itself in the market to be of a certain expectation. Now, I will say it 100%. That now puts more pressure on the cruise line because at that price point, they need to deliver on that expectation. But that's okay because I'm pretty sure they're going to. So when you're getting sticker shock looking at things, I want you to think about the clients. And more importantly, I want you to think about the fact that their wallet is not your wallet. And what they see value in, you might not see value in, and vice versa. And that's okay. I'm sure I've told the story before. I remember my dad had stopped at a deal. I had gone with him. We went to a dealership and there was a convertible. And it was your classic muscle car convertible. And my mom really wanted this car. And at the time, I think it was like $35,000. Who spends that on a new vehicle? That's crazy. Little did we know what cars and stuff cost in 2024, but that's another story. But that's mind blowing. Why would you ever waste that kind of money on a car? Well, now we fast forward to a month later, and my dad's in the market to buy himself a new pickup truck because he wanted one for work. He was a farmer at the time. It had purpose and other such. So he went in and he bought one. But it wasn't quite what he wanted. It was a full-size box with I don't remember if it was extended cab, super cab. I don't know. It was 4-door. They've all changed their names as to what they call themselves. I don't keep up. But it was a 4-door pickup truck with a full-size box. And it wasn't quite the color he wanted. But it was $50,000. And now to him, that was a good deal. But yet, 2 weeks later, the sales lady calls up and says, "Hey, I know that truck you just bought wasn't quite what you wanted." My dad's like, "Yeah, but it's a good truck." She's like, "I know, but I got one in the color you asked for, with the box size you wanted, with all the features you asked for. Did you want to come have a look?" So off he goes to the dealership, not to trade in the one he bought just 2 weeks ago, but to go buy a second one. So now this same person who thought $35,000 was too much to spend on a car has just spent $100,000 on 2 pickup trucks. Why? Because they had it in the right color. I laughed growing up. It was always that thought of the salesman would look at the woman and say, "And what color would you like?" I'm like, you know what? That wasn't a woman thing. That was a man thing, as it turns out. But here's the scoop. When I asked him, because I was very curious, I am always curious in how sales work and what makes people say yes. He's like, "Well, this was a good deal." The same is true when they did their Australia tour. They spent significantly more because my mom recognized her own outfit in the brochure's photos because they used travelers' photos. So they felt like they would fit in. They paid almost double to a trip that they said was too much. Money doesn't have anything to do with it. As Michael Vickers said, price is never the issue unless it's the issue, in which case it's the only issue, but it's never the issue. Sticker shock happens when there's no context. When we look at how many restaurants were included, when we look at the caliber of entertainment that comes at it, when we look at all the things that are included, and now we're going to compare it to another cruise line that might have a lot of bells and whistles, but every one of those bells and whistles is going to make you whistle when you find out how much extra it costs you to participate in it. There's so many things that when you're selling travel that we need to put into context. But we also need to never, ever judge something for our clients. If somebody came to me and they wanted to book something old, run down, and just all around junky, and it was coming in at 3 times the normal expected price, I might say to them, I can do this for you, but I've got some real reservations about it. Just simply because I don't think the value matches. When you're faced with sticker shock, is there something that creates value that would create context to the pricing? Why do you think on cruise lines, and I'm just going to use cruise lines as the example because that's kind of where we've been hanging out today. They have an inside cabin. They have a multi-bedroom penthouse suite with staircases and everything else in them. Why? Because they have a multitude of different passengers that sail with them that see value in different aspects of the ship. Personally, I see value in a stunning stateroom. Why? Because even when I go away, I often work. Why? Because I am completely inspired while I travel. Because that's how my brain works. The more I relax, the more creativity room I leave to come in. So the idea of booking an inside makes my skin crawl because I want to go sit on that balcony. You give me a giant veranda that has a 6-person table there. I'm probably not even going to go into port in some of those areas because I've already been there. I would happily sit there on that deck stationary and work on my business plan for the next however many months. To work on things that give me inspiration. I love to find a quiet place. And if it can be in my own suite on the balcony, anything like that, I'm going to be all in. And yet now we're going to look at my 25-year-old ranch hand son. He's going to be like, well, I'm not hanging out in my room because I live alone with my cat and work with cows all day. So I want to get out and I want to go meet people. I want to go do things. I want to go experience things. So what he's looking for is going to be different than what I'm looking for. And yet we're going to end up at the same dining room at supper at night. Don't let your sticker shock change whether or not somebody else buys something. The only reason it should change something is because it's based in fact and data, not in emotion and thoughts. If you've ever wanted to, or you've ever found yourself asking, how do people get people to book trips to the polar region? How do you get people to book world cruises? How do you get people to book all of these sorts of things? You can't let sticker shock affect you. Now, when it came to this ship, yes, I had sticker shock, but I was looking at it for my own wallet because it was my own wallet because I was going to be the passenger. And I have a lot of options. I was not actually looking to travel on that one, but I'm always open to a new idea. But if it was a client that would have come to me and I was having this conversation with a client, it would have been an entirely different thing. I would have said something to the effect of, the demand is really big right now. So it's a touch bit higher than I was anticipating, but I can see why it's at that price point. Are we comfortable to proceed in this price point, or are we looking to have something a little bit more economical? Let it be their decision. For some people, they just want to be a part of the newest, latest, greatest. Some people only ever sail a ship once because they sail it in its first year. Then they move on to the next one. Some people do sail a ship or choose a resort or choose a destination because that's what everybody else on Instagram is doing. And some people do it because this is something that they've been watching for years as it's being built. And they just want to go and experience it for themselves. The only question is there value for the price they're paying? And value is subjective, and only the client can determine whether or not something has value. Until next time, happy selling.